Good day and greetings to everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of the Islands Forum Plus webinar. Today, we are talking about policy frameworks and collaboration models for SIDS working on chemical and waste management. As an introduction, the Implementing Sustainable Low and Non-Chemical Development in Small Island Developing States, or ISLANDS GEF program, is supporting 33 islands in the Atlantic, Caribbean, Indian, and Pacific regions to improve chemicals and waste management. Islands aims to safely dispose of around 120,000 tons of hazardous products, 1,500 tons of persistent organic pollutants, and prevent nearly 90 tons of mercury from polluting the environment. But more importantly, it aims to reach millions of people through the activities it does in the island nations. To do this, the Islands program has 4 main objectives. Prevent the buildup of chemicals entering SIDS by strengthening legislation and import regulations on products containing hazardous materials. Safely manage and dispose of existing hazardous chemicals, products, and materials by raising awareness of the pathways of contamination and building capacity among key stakeholders to sustainably manage hazardous chemicals and waste. Islands also manages products that enter SIDS throughout their life cycle, from import oversight to final safe disposal, and build local, national, and international public-private partnerships to facilitate this life cycle approach. Lastly, the Islands program facilitates SIDS-to-SIDS learning and sharing of knowledge. By ensuring innovations and successes in one SIDS can be picked up and inform activities in another. The GEF Islands program is supporting the Green Forum and its communities of practice to achieve this. On to today's program. Island supports implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the priority multilateral environmental agreements that islands countries adhere to. The conventions are the leading authority for environmental regulations and enforcement mechanisms governing transboundary movements of hazardous wastes. Procedures for prior informed consent for regarding trade of hazardous chemicals and pesticides in international trade, and protection of human health against toxic chemicals in the environment. Islands also supports the Minamata Convention on Mercury, especially in identifying and sharing best practices related to the management of mercury-containing products. This is the overall backbone and policy background of Islands. Our GGKP team will post the links that will lead you to more information regarding the BRS conventions and Minamata Secretariat websites. And like we said in the previous webinar, Islands is supported by the Global Environment Facility, led by the United Nations Environment Program, and is part of a broader set of GEF initiatives which support the development of green and blue economy approaches in SIDS. But what do we have today in store? Shall we have a look at the program? If we have the slides. Okay. We will see today, just one moment.
Do you see the slides, Jana?
Not yet. Can we have the slides up?
Just a moment.
For me.
Okay, I will stop share and then I will start sharing again.
Okay, but then our program today, we will have speakers from across the island regions. So we have speakers from the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the Caribbean region. We will have a feature presentation on how policy and regulatory frameworks actually enhance collaboration through digital spaces and policy support systems. And so, without further ado, to give us the overview and rationale, there it is. Thank you. So this is the overview of the program today. We would like to welcome all of you audience who are patching in from different parts of the world and also working in different sectors in the chemicals and waste management spheres. We would love to hear more of what you're saying, so please interact with the chat or post some questions on the Q&A, and we will strive to answer them even during or after the webinar. We would also like to say thank you to those registrants who have submitted their questions beforehand. As we do not have enough time and perhaps the questions are beyond the scope of this webinar, we will get back to you, or stay tuned to the Islands Forum Plus series and you might have your questions answered in one of our webinars. Next slide, please. On that note, may I welcome the head of the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership and also the Global Program Manager for Islands CCKM, Ms. Fabienne Pierre, to walk us through the first topic, from policy gaps to practical solutions, collaborative knowledge sharing to strengthen chemicals and waste management in SIDS. Welcome, Fabienne.
Thank you very much, Jana, and good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this very important webinar and discussion. I will try to keep it short, but just to emphasize, based on Jana's introduction, the importance of strengthening policy, legislation, and multi-stakeholder collaboration in the GEF Islands program as a key objective to enable small island developing states to enter a safe, flow, and non-chemical development pathway. SIDS, like many other countries, face persistent structural challenges when it comes to creating the enabling policy and regulatory environment that they need to achieve that objective. For instance, limited data or challenges in terms of data collection, fragmented institutional mandates or coordination challenges across chemicals, waste, circular economy agendas. And to address those challenges or those gaps, UNEP and many partners have developed complementary policy support interventions that can translate or help translate, work with countries to translate global commitments into actionable and national regional solutions. So in that context, just very few words about GGKP and islands. GGKP is the executing agency of the Coordination, Communications, and Knowledge Management that we call CCKM Global Project under the GEF Islands program that is led by UNEP. And in this role, we support these solutions that I just mentioned by doing several things. First of all, ensuring that policy relevant knowledge across all regions is shared through a central knowledge hub, and that also includes, of course, the Islands Forum Plus, the webinar series that we are participating in right now. It also includes curating available knowledge and best practices for SIDS-specific policy challenges, covering different themes and topics from EPR to recycling or stakeholder engagement and others, and convening interregional communities of practice and partnerships to ensure that policy lessons can travel across linguistic, geographic, or institutional boundaries. So today, Jana took us through the agenda. We will be hearing about regional activities under the GEF Islands program related to supporting policy legislation and collaboration models in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Indian Ocean regions. And we will also present one available tool for policymakers in developing countries that is called the Waste Management and Circular Economy Policy Support System, WMPSS, that GGKP has developed together with the UN Office of Sustainable Development. The interesting thing with this tool is that it could be tailored and is probably something that can be made available to SIDS countries in the context of the Islands program to collect data, monitor progress, and get knowledge insights on how to address specific challenges and gaps. So WMPSS provides a structured, evidence-based framework to in a way, assess policy maturity, to also identify gaps across the waste and chemicals policy areas and sectors, and that also support a cross-sector collaboration, for instance, for a data collection, data analysis, and so forth. For the Islands program, and we will hear more about the WMPSS, so I will not elaborate more, but for the Islands program, tools like this policy support system can add value by reinforcing policy coherence, monitoring capacities, and by providing access to knowledge resources that can help address specific challenges in relation to policies or legislative reforms or regulatory norms, by creating this shared analytical platform. I think I will stop here. I would like to thank you again, Jana, and to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabienne. That is a very good introduction and background on why this important webinar is being held today. We are joined by at least 90 participants all over the globe, and we are here going to next listen to perspectives from the islands countries. As we said earlier, we have over 33 islands all over the globe. And the first set, we will be listening to the Atlantic region. Our next speaker is our Regional Project Coordinator based in the BCRC, Senegal, and he is an experienced environmental engineer. He has a demonstrated history of working in the environmental services industry, skilled in sustainable development, energy, environmental compliance, and sustainability. Our next speaker is a strong community and social services professional, and he is a very dedicated Islands Manager. May I welcome Mr. Florisvindo Furtado, Regional Project Coordinator, Islands Atlantic, BCRC, Senegal. Over to you, Florisvindo.
Hello, good afternoon, Jana. Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this very important forum. Today, this is a good honor for me to be here to discuss the island's Atlantic perspectives and the efforts across Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and the São Tomé and Príncipe in managing the hazardous waste priorities, waste streams through improved policy legislation and collaboration. First, let me guide you through the context of the islands Atlantics. So, as you know, these three islands nations, they share some characteristics like the small land area, the reliance on imports, a fragile ecosystem, and also growing waste challenges. Through the Islands program, we aim for practical, country-driven actions aligned with global environmental agreements. All these three countries, they have ratified the key conventions. As you know, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, these older conventions, has been ratified, but only two of these countries ratified the Minamata Convention, which is São Tomé and Guinea-Bissau, still pending the ratification for Cabo Verde. So the national legal framework in these three countries exist, but often they lack coordination and alignment with international standards. Examples of these include environmental and waste laws, as well as plastic ban across the region, taking, for example, into account one of these countries that has also the second generation of the plastic ban law, which, for example, for Cabo Verde, regarding the single-use plastics. But despite progress, implementation gaps persist, such as rising volumes of waste electric and electronic equipments, plastics, end-of-life vehicles, and mercury products. Open burning and burning also remain widespread, posing health and environmental risks to these three countries. Institutional and operational capacity constraints are central to the challenge. Enforcement is limited by weak coordination across ministries, laboratories, and the customs lack sufficient testing capacity, and mandates are really fragmented. These constraints translate directly into legislative and practical gaps in addressing persistent organic pollutants, mercury, WEE, ALVs, and in establishing extended producer responsibility system. Let me be more specific about the main challenges faced by these three countries. We can start by the legislative gaps. You will find that many areas you will find many areas with lack of specific laws or regulations for the organic pollutants, mercury, waste electric and electronic equipments, and ELVs, and for establishing producer responsibility schemes. Where laws exist, they do not always provide the tools needed for enforcement or for incentivizing circular economy practice. Also, you will find limited enforcement and coordination, where roles and responsibilities are often split across multiple ministries: environment, transport, health, trade, and customs. Without formal coordination mechanisms, this fragmentation slows decision-making and enforcement, as you know. Customs authorities typically lack the technical tools, training, and harmonized classification systems to recognize hazardous chemicals and contaminated goods in imports, and to manage transboundary movement compliantly. Also, another challenge regards the infrastructure and financing constraints. So in this particular case, there are very few engineered landfills and almost no dedicated secure facilities for hazardous waste storage or treatment. The geography of remote islands makes the secure domestic treatments or export of hazardous waste costly and logistically complex. For example, you will find countries with several islands with really poor connection, which creates this kind of challenges. Also, financing structures for waste management and disposal are really weak, are not really, sometimes or most times they are not the priority, and private investment is limited by perceived low return and small market size. Another challenge is the limited regional collaboration, where the Atlantic region currently has limited harmonized standards, limited shared treatment and disposal solutions, and no consolidated regional approach to hazardous wastes. Also, private and informal sector dynamics are really they face also some challenges with recycling activities at small scale, which often lack profitability and technical standards, which doesn't encourage this kind of investments. Also, another challenge is the social and environmental risks. Many of these countries, or most of these countries, face challenges with public awareness about hazardous wastes, which is really, really low, and health impacts from inadequate waste practices still persist. These challenges are urgent because they affect public health, economic resilience, and the natural capital on which tourism and fishery depends. As you know, these countries, most of their economy is based on tourism, especially Cabo Verde and São Tomé, but mostly Cabo Verde. They also complicate each country's ability to meet their international obligations under the conventions that they have ratified. But what are the islands' proposed solutions? Under islands, we propose a pragmatic, phased suite of interventions that combine policy reforms, capacity building, safe management and circular economy measures, and knowledge sharing, tailored to the reality of each of these Atlantic SIDS. So, to summarize quickly, the policy and institutional strengthening. In this case, we need to develop and align national strategies, model policies, and regulatory frameworks with the Basel, Stockholm, Rotterdam, and the Minamata conventions, to also establish clear and formal coordination mechanisms across ministries and agencies, as well as to promote regional harmonization of standards and the procedures where feasible. Another priority action is the capacity building, where we will need to conduct training needs assessment and implement training of trainers program to cascade knowledge locally, as well as to strengthen laboratory and testing capabilities incrementally. Also, another solution for these three counts will be to work on safe management and disposal. In this case, we'll need to update national inventories of obsolete pesticides, PCBs, mercury-added products, POPs, and other priority wastes. Where domestic treatment is not feasible, we will need to promote regional approach for interim storage, consolidation, and environmentally sound export. Something that these countries has, or some of these countries has already started doing. And also circular economy and private sector engagement. In this case, we need to support pilot initiatives for the waste electric and electronic equipment and ELVs management. And finally, the knowledge management and collaboration, one of these pillars, which is needed to make the connection between island Atlantic countries to global island knowledge platforms to enable self-learning, replication of best practices, etc., as well as to foster regional dialogues and joint capacity programs with neighboring countries. In closing, our outlined technical and policy pathways address the realities facing these islands, requiring national leadership, regional cooperation, and strong partnership. By aligning laws, building capacity, and enabling safe and circular waste management, we think that we can protect health, ecosystems, and economies. So let us work together to keep our islands healthy, resilient for future generations. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Florisvindo. That is a very excellent way of summing up the regional activities and policy contexts in the Atlantic. Please stay tuned. There are a lot of interactions now on the chat, many questions. We thank you, the audience. And now I think for the Q&A, we will come back to you. Thank you, Florisvindo.
Thank you, Jana.
Cheers. For our next speaker, it's actually very related to what Florisvindo is talking about. The context of policy is very much linked to regulation and enforcement. And our next speaker represents the island's Indian Ocean region. And she works as the UNDP Regional Project Manager for the GEF Islands Indian Ocean and active in Comoros, Mauritius, Maldives, and Seychelles. Islands Indian Ocean supports SIDS in pursuing safe chemical development pathways. Our speaker is a social and environmental sustainability expert, passionate about the interlinkages between sustainability, gender equality, and individual consciousness. Experienced in global environmental governance, before joining UNDP, she worked at UNEP, UNOPS, and the UN Environment Management Group. It is my privilege to introduce Clara Mottura from UNDP. Welcome, Clara. Please join us as we talk about the Indian Ocean's experience.
Thank you, Jana, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here as a speaker. So as Jana mentioned, I am the Regional Project Manager for Islands Indian Ocean. I am based in Comoros, and we work also in Mauritius, Seychelles, and the Maldives. And today, I would like to talk with you about our work with customs, specifically for Comoros, but in general for SIDS. I find it very interesting because customs is something that is often overlooked, but it is actually, for SIDS, it represents a critical first line of defense against chemicals and hazardous waste pollution. In fact, like if you think about it, just a single improperly controlled shipment can have long-lasting impacts on soil, groundwater, coastal ecosystems, and public health. And this is the risks are even higher for SIDS where ecosystems are fragile and waste management and disposal options are very limited at best. And so that's why that implementing the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, and Minamata conventions at the border, it's actually a strategic necessity. And that's also why Islands works with the administration of Comoros, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Maldives to provide specialized customs training to support the officers to better identify hazardous chemicals and problematic waste streams, control and monitor the imports, and apply multilateral environmental agreements. So the ultimate objective of this activity is to provide agents with practical knowledge and technical expertise to enforce import controls and bans, specifically related to pesticides, POPs, mercury, and hazardous chemicals. Yes, so we have been working together with the national authorities and local consultants to design these training modules and then deliver them. We have already delivered this training in Maldives, Comoros, and Seychelles, and we will be doing it in Mauritius too. The main participants were customs officer, directly responsible for cargo inspections, clearance procedures, and border controls, but also government officials from concerned institutions, such as the Ministry of Agriculture or Environment. While working with the customs officers, so we realized that there are kind of three main categories of challenges that the border officers are facing. From a regulatory perspective, a lot of hazardous product transit under generic customs code, and this makes identification much difficult. This is also difficult to implement EPR systems on packaging and plastics. HS codes are really important, and if it is all generic, this makes policy implementation very difficult and very hard. But also the knowledge of international conventions varies significantly between officers. And in some cases, for example, Comoros, the recently ratified conventions are not yet fully integrated into the standard operating procedures. And so it sort of falls through the cracks of the regulation. From an operational side perspective, very often the detection and screening equipment is insufficient or outdated. Again, in Comoros, there is none. Custom officers face real health and safety risk when handling unknown or hazardous substances without adequate protection. And in certain cases, again, like in Comoros, broken or unclaimed material, which could also include, I don't know, cleaning products, oil, packaging, is burnt on the spot at the port. So you can imagine like the surroundings and the fumes, etc. From an institutional point of view, coordination remains weak, and this is another challenge. So the information sharing between customs, environment department, health is limited. And this fragmentation ultimately allow hazardous substances to enter the territory undetected. And this is why, especially in Comoros, we work not only to reinforce the individual capacity of officers, but really to embed the BRS and Minamata procedures directly into the digital system for customs control that is called the Sidonia. And this is really to ensure that the environmental control is institutionalized and automatized. Maybe very briefly, just letting you know that this activity is among our goals of Islands Indian Ocean. We work in terms of policy, we work to strengthen and harmonize the policy and regulatory frameworks to control chemicals imports and phase out POPs and address fragmented legislation. And so yeah, we work extensively on developing policies and laws, but customs are really key to ensure their implementation. For example, again, I'm using the Comoros example here, but in Comoros, Islands has developed the first national waste management law. We have updated the national environment law and included prohibited chemicals and developed a national waste management strategy, application decrees, and communal action plan. And as I was mentioning before, custom officers are key to ensure that these systems are actually implemented. And that's why we collaborate with them and we try to develop standard operating procedures and try to improve coordination among ministry and agencies responsible for chemicals and waste management. So I think that this is it for now. So I will leave the floor back to Jana. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them later. Over.
Thank you so much, Clara. It actually answers one of the Q&A chats already. So if you can stay on the slide that Clara is talking about, how can successful policy and collaboration models from SIDS be adapted to scale to support inland developing countries? So there are a lot of questions from our participants, Clara. Many people are also affirming the effort work with customs because they are truly the first line of defense. And on that note, our colleague Karen posted on the chat the article that Clara and her team authored about the same activity. Thank you once again, Clara, and we will speak to you during the Q&A. Cheers. For our next speaker, I have the pleasure of introducing the collaboration model on the practical sense, building people up. This is actually talking about the highlights of the Islands Caribbean Globally Harmonized System Training Activities, which is part of the overall program activity in the Caribbean islands. And I see our Caribbean colleagues here. Thank you so much. Shout out to everybody. But in that light, I would like to introduce our consultant from UNITAR, who has over a decade of experience working with international and regional organizations, the government, and nonprofit sector. She is committed to working with key stakeholders on delivering solutions that drive positive environmental and socioeconomic benefit. Her philosophy involves collaborative learning, as she believes that solutions are truly sustainable where there is mutual learning and an exchange of ideas and experience. In the Islands Caribbean project, she was the consultant for the BCRC Caribbean's activity assessment of the implementation of the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, better known as GHS. She will now give an overview of the lessons and highlights from this activity and walk us through how this collaboration model can actually benefit chemicals and waste management. Delena, we have the pleasure of welcoming you.
Thank you so much, Jana. It is indeed my pleasure to be here with you and everyone who is participating and my esteemed colleagues. As you've heard from my philosophy, what we are actually doing today falls right in line with that. So yes, I am Delena Indar and I'm from the Chemicals and Waste Management Program from UNITAR. So in the context of the webinar today, my presentation serves as an example of the pairing of regulatory frameworks and the translation of that into knowledge materials for capacity building. And this occurred in the Caribbean, focused on the GHS. And this was achieved through two outcomes, which I will go into later. Next slide, please. And next, good. So bearing in mind the time that we have, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the GHS, but it is important to keep at the forefront about the importance of the GHS to begin with, because it is a true backbone of chemicals management. And its importance really cannot be underscored enough because it ensures chemical hazards are identified and classified consistently. Now, when we're talking about policy frameworks here, it's foundational when it comes to the GHS because it creates that legal basis. But there are also key elements in which it's important, such as defining rules and enabling enforcement. And these are all aspects that, when it comes to capacity building, are important to drill into. Next slide. And in my presentation, I have left a number of slides for you to go through afterwards, just for some more details, such as this one that goes into more details on the purpose and benefits of the GHS, such as enhancing protection, providing legal framework, and facilitating international trade. It's interesting to know, though, even though the GHS is so critical, it's still not operational in more than 120 countries. Many of those are developing countries or countries with economies in transition, including small islands. And it might be interesting to know, well, from you who are participating today, you can put in a chat which country you're from and give us maybe one or two words about what you think about the status of implementation in your country. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project activities that occurred in the Caribbean. And in particular, it was under an output 1.4. So we had two main outcomes in terms of what was done or activities. And these were to assess the current implementation of GHS in each of the project countries and to understand the barriers and opportunities for the implementation. And you may hear me perhaps say several times during this presentation that having national assessments are quite key. Later on, when I talk about the tools and perhaps how you can apply them, it's really important to know that these assessments are what will ensure it's tailored to a national context because barriers and opportunities that exist would be different. So in this project, it did start with the assessment in each of those project countries listed at the below of that slide there, 12 countries. Then using these assessments and as well as lessons learned and training knowledge, we developed a training program to assist the Caribbean countries to capitalize on opportunities within each context. And a bit later on, I'll talk more about what these materials were and how that program was, how it developed. Okay, next slide. And just to detail a bit more on the outcomes, In terms of the assessments, there was a regional assessment report, but there were country profiles within that regional report, because it's important to know that with GHS, it's really important to liaise with the different stakeholders. That is how you have proper full implementation. And so from this, other than the recommendations and opportunities that were captured in the report, there were also country stakeholder maps. And this also fed into the data collection to get the perspectives on the barriers and opportunities for GHS. In terms of the other 2 points, I'll touch on that as we progress through the slides. So we can go to the next slide. Very briefly, I'm going to just showcase what some of the assessments contained. And these are also slides that I'm just going to leave for post-webinar because it showcases some of the elements of the assessment. So when it comes to legislative frameworks, it's quite important to know what the status is in each of the countries. So in which sectors it's being implemented. So it may be full, it may be partial, for example, and whether it actually is in legal frameworks. And then there are the more technical parts, such as which editions are there and what does it say in terms of building blocks. But either way, that was just an example of some of the legislative assessments in there. And here, for instance, what barriers were considered by the countries to be the most critical for the implementation of the GHS. So we can go next slide as well. Good. And like I said, it's also important to note that this data collection or consulting with the different stakeholders, such as government, private sector, academia, is quite important. All right, now I'm going to talk a bit about the training segment, and that was the outcome, the second outcome of the project. So using, as I explained before, the assessments and lessons learned, there was a training workshop that was held in both English and Spanish during the project. And it was an interactive hybrid course with exercises conducted throughout. From this, there were 2 types of certification. There was attendance and then an ambassador's diploma. And if I have time towards the end of this, I'll talk a bit more about what the ambassador program that we're developing entails. Coming out of this, though, there was essentially a syllabus. So we can go to the next slide. Good. So coming out of it, there was a syllabus with some modules with learning materials developed from that project. And this served as an example of a way to make this training more sustainable and more accessible to, at that point, the Caribbean. But really, it's open for any country, anybody really to access these materials. So it is introductory. It is available on the BCRC Caribbean's Digital Learning Hub, and there are 3 modules. It is introductory, so there's the introduction. It then talks about GHS implementation. And the 3rd module then drills down into a more regional context. And this, I really highly encourage you to go to that, to DLH, to check out their materials. It's very interactive, and it does work in the technical expertise into this. So here too was an example of how there were training materials developed from this. Next slide. Okay. In addition, UNITAR offers a more technical GHS course, and as part of this project, 12 scholarships were provided and utilized by the GEF Islands participating Caribbean countries. And in fact, coming out of this, and the fact that UNITAR continues to work on the GHS and improve and make more accessible learning materials, there are discounts that are available for GEF Islands participating countries as we do these courses every year. So if that's something that you're also interested in, you can reach out to us about that. Next slide. Okay, thanks. So I wanted to focus a bit on some key takeaways that you can learn from based on the experience that we had. And I see in the participant list, we have a number of persons who were involved in the project. So by all means, I encourage you all to share some tips and more lessons as well in the chat. For us though, there are three key ones I do want to highlight, and there are many. But for one, the regional aspect is quite important to develop these regional networks to facilitate ongoing collaboration. This itself strengthens that policy implementation. And when it comes to these capacity materials, it builds that regional capacity so that now there can be peer exchange, sharing of lessons learned, and a more cohesive approach when it comes to actually implementing the GHS. Okay, right. And the other two, well, and this is actually linked to the GHS Ambassador Program that hopefully I'll talk a bit at the end as well. But this gives an opportunity to maintain communication with these individuals. And another opportunity, and this is really important for small islands where resources might be scarce, is to explore synergies with other initiatives. So build out that capacity in other chemical management programs and so forth. Okay, I'm almost done, Jana. Next slide. Good. And the opportunities here, there are lots of resources and training. So for instance, there's the model legislation, and you can go to the next slide. Good. This was something that advanced out of the project, and there was the creation of this model legislation. There's a link at the bottom of this slide to access this legislation. And it's really, again, important that legislation should always be based on an analysis, as it will explain what's existed and what's needed. But this is a tool that you may find very interesting because it creates almost a checklist as to how you can implement and take certain parts that's necessary into legislation and policies for GHS. So, I mean, if there are any questions about this at all, by all means, reach out to us. But this really was an example of technical assistance and what can be used as a tool. Good. Next slide. Good. And these other two slides just provide some more information about UNITAR and how to access our resources. Good. So I think that may be my time there. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about this, and happy to stay very shortly before I have to run off for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Delena, don't worry. This is such a great way. You're on time. I just had to jump in here because this is really the purpose of the reflection pause. We have 3 regions that actually expound on the overview, and then a clear intervention on capacity building and training at the policy level. But what you just expounded is really, looking at the sustainability of capacity building programs, which UNITAR is very much an expert of. So the question that is in everybody's minds, in particular in mine, is what is the follow-up? Are there any follow-up after the GSS training in the Caribbean? Any collaboration opportunities for other island regions or our listeners today?
Yes, thanks for that question, Jana. And actually, I touched on one part of it, which was that legislation. But the other thing I want to point out very quickly is that there's this need to move beyond these one-off efforts. And as part of this, I mean, paired with this, we have investments are needed, but collaboration is needed, capacity building is needed. So to pair all of this together, the one thing to answer your question I'd like to focus on, and I'm happy you brought it up because I kept saying I'd like to talk more about the GHS Ambassador Program, is that we are in the development of building out this program. In the Caribbean region, we did start this through what I mentioned as the Ambassador's Diploma, in that there was a start to a journey, essentially, with that introductory training. But this ambassador program will be housed in something we're calling the GHS Hub. And right now that GHS Hub actually has a live knowledge base. So I can share that link if that would be helpful to participants, but it is a hub that is being still built out. So that hub, though, will serve as a forum for peer exchange for that knowledge base and to maintain momentum over time. In effect, though, this is a broader journey to strengthen chemicals management and implement what's actually in the frameworks rather than have a framework and treat it separately. So all in all, that's an example of what is in process after this project that contributes overall to the safer handling of chemicals and improving and protecting human health, which is particularly important for all countries, but especially for SIDS, where sometimes finding those resources can be challenging.
Thank you so much, Delena. And I think that's a great way to cap up this first session of Islands Perspectives. We would love to have you again, and good luck in all your endeavors. Sorry to miss you at the Q&A, but please stay on if you are able to. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for more information about the 3 island regions we've featured this first segment, please have a look at the Islands website. Our colleagues have posted some information that would surely pique your interest. So we've seen the perspectives, we've seen what it's like. How is it now translated into something that is really data-driven, policy supportive, and transformative at the ground level? And our next speaker will actually show that, demonstrating the power of knowledge management systems and how it can advance the island's goals and ambitions. But let me introduce him first. Our next speaker is a computer scientist, a knowledge manager, and a professional based in Switzerland, founder of Heuristica and co-founder of NQ Ideation. His former research in artificial intelligence and cognitive science has deeply influenced his career. He has dedicated himself to delivering transformative, efficient, and secure knowledge and information knowledge management solutions with complex organizational domains. But more importantly, his focus areas include development, sustainability, security, and social empowerment. This person is a firm believer in the transformative power of strong, sincere human relationships, and you will see it in the next few minutes as he walks us through the Waste Management Policy Support System, or WMPSS, which is a digital evidence base that could strengthen waste and chemicals policy and SIDS. So listen in to Professor Dr. Mr. Giangulielmo Calvi. Giangu, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jana, for such an amazing presentation. But most of all, thanks to all the participants and good day any time of the day, wherever you are. It's really a pleasure to have this chance to be with you today and to be able to introduce more in depth the work that GGKP, in partnership with the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, UNDESA, UNEP, of course, and GGGI, with the support of the Ministry of Climate and Energy and Environment of Korea, that we have been working in the past year, because we are trying to address something that is a global problem that is not focused only and exclusively on the waste management aspect. I will try to dig with you a little bit further into that. So let's go with the first slide and enter a little bit more into the conversation. So we have structured this presentation part basically in 3 sections. So in the first one, I will try to introduce the concepts that are behind the waste management policy support systems and how this can be generalized to policy support systems able to address different kind of contexts. Then we will have a walkthrough of the current WMPSS, that's the shortcut name for our application, and how this has been used and is currently used by the participating country. And then there will be an open discussion in which we will have a real call for action for all of us. So let's move into the concepts and rationale. Now, I call this the power of self-assessment, and use this quote about the greatest journey is the one of self-discovery, because WMPSS is about self-assessment. in which term is about self-assessment. The idea was to provide countries with the capacity to indeed self-assess the status of their policy capabilities in improving waste management, and give, through this self-assessment, the chance to observe in a private manner where are the gaps, what are the things that we are struggling with, and how these things can be improved. Eventually, filling the gap between what is discovered and the knowledge and evidences that country needs to act. I will show you what this doesn't mean, but basically we have brought into the picture artificial intelligence, not ChatGPT. Please bear with me. There's no third-party things here. I will develop on that. We're talking about artificial intelligence models developed by GGKP for this very specific purpose. So we're talking about something that is aimed at supporting country in self-assessing where they are with their policies in waste management. So let's move on the next one. This comes from a consideration which is fundamentally that we are not able to regulate what we cannot measure. And the point is that most of the measures also that we apply, and like big projects like the BRS Convention, for instance, they do that. They have extremely detailed quantitative measure about waste management. They lack one dimension, and is the qualitative dimension. Is that fuzzy, difficult to capture dimension where policies becomes complex. WMPSS tries to cover this gap by introducing a way to measure this fuzzy part. Let's move forward. So how does it work? WMPSS is substantially a platform online with restricted access, where countries that are invited to participate or that requested to participate are able to execute a pipeline of action that is there on the right. Basically, they do in total privacy, they execute a self-assessment survey across 6 components and 412 questions. This survey has been carefully crafted in order to show where the gaps are. The result of the survey are automatically combined into indicators that are then presented in 2 ways, into one confidential reports that the country can then privately distribute, and into a dashboard that assemble all these indicators together, eventually showing where we do have gaps, right? Now, when a gap is identified, it goes to the third stage. Our artificial intelligence model, specialized in generating knowledge recommendation, goes out through the web of our partner and scouts across more than 50,000 knowledge products. Now, bear with me, when I speak about knowledge products here, we are speaking about actionable knowledge. We are speaking about webinar recordings, guidelines, case studies, anything that contains knowledge that the country can use to actionable change the gap. So to really do something about it. And then there's the last component. The WMPSS supports a yearly review, which every single year is updated, so to have a tracking on the progress across years and how certain actions have provided improvement in respect of certain gaps. So we can move to the next one. As you can see, the workflow is extremely simple, yet is really sophisticated in the way we try to implement it in the back. So there's an input layer where the country privately self-assess themselves. There is a scoring layer where this self-assessment is transformed into indicators and scoring mechanisms. There is an analysis layer where you can observe the scoring. And again, it's important, I will present this to you in a few minutes. This scoring, it is not versus any benchmark. It is a relative scoring that has been designed to trigger attention on the gap that the country has, not on an overall performance or a regional performance, none of that. And then we have the results, which are the recommendations. So based on the scoring we have, what can we do? What should we know so that we can act in some way toward these gaps? And then next one. So the 6 components of WMPSS, as I mentioned, address different aspects of the policy challenge in waste management. I have to be fair here, 5 of these, so the first 5, are those that are component, qualitative component, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning. The 6th one is a status component. I will develop, and is a quantitative component, but I will quickly explain why this is a little bit of an exception. So the 5 component, capacity, public governance, engagement, finance, and monitoring, they want to address indeed how are we doing, what are we doing, in which way in each of these areas. And the responses can inform them the recommendations that will follow. The status component exists because, of course, while the United Nations Statistics Office requires a certain level of say information, so to countries to provide information about the status of waste management, these obligations vary across countries. So the idea is that this can be a single stop shop that countries can use to keep track of their data in a private manner, in a synthesized way, before eventually go to the official UN reporting system. And now we can go to the next one. And basically, the idea here is to launch you the hint, because SIDS countries are absolutely eligible to be part of the WMPSS network, which substantially offer a series of really, I would say, SIDS tailored benefit in this sense. So the fact that, in fact, as I mentioned, this is compatible with pre-existing conventions. So BRS, for instance, require a submission of certain data, which are primarily quantitative. PSS supporting the qualitative analysis that can complement the reporting for that. The AI recommendation are real actions that can be used to implement changes and program eventually changes into the policies. The SIDS to SIDS collaboration, I will tell you more about that, but in fact, WMPSS is a tool that has been proven strong through the workshops that UNOSD organize periodically, that brings together all the countries that are participating in order to share the lessons learned from the recommendation obtained and from the self-assessment generated. I think this is a key point because I have seen amazing stuff happening in the last workshop, for instance, that was in Santo Domingo, so where Dominican Republic was hosting us, and we have seen really great things there. Let's move to the next one. And to complete this section of the presentation, indeed, there are already 3 countries that at the moment are onboarded into WMPSS. One of these already led the way by compiling in a very detailed manner the survey, by obtaining important recommendations that have been discussed a little bit more than a month ago in Santo Domingo. So let's move to the live platform walkthrough so that I will be able to actually share with you live what is in practice this tool. And I hope you can all see my screen. So here we are simply in the homepage of the platform. This part is accessible publicly. You will find a video that I invite you to check that explains the entire pipeline of WMPSS and how this impacts the design of better policies in waste management. Now, let's go inside. So this is the key of the work. The work, as you can see, has a linear workflow, the one I presented before, in which the country is guided step by step through the key operations to work on its own, on the building on its own evidence base. So the first thing is each country can define a team. Now, why this is important? Because the experience we had is that waste management evidence, data, information are scattered among multiple actors. For instance, about, of course, Ministry of Environment, but Ministry of Health, NGO and municipalities contribute in supporting, even business become part of the picture. So here the country can literally create a team of vetted partners that can join the platform into their own private space and contribute in supporting the data collection in specific components. The data collection happens here in the actual component of the questionnaire. As you can see, the questionnaire goes through these 6 components that I mentioned before: the capacity, public governance, engagement, finance, monitoring, and the status, which is the only one containing data sets, numeric data sets, quantitative data sets. So what is important to notice here is that the format of the questions offer multiple opportunity to answer, also by providing additional explanation to each of the responses. But most of all, the entire set of questions is accompanied by a detailed guideline that explain for every single question what this means. What are the references in the knowledge bases of UNEP, of GGGI, of UNOSD, of the United Nations in general, that can let us understand what's the scope of this question. And what does it mean if I reply yes? So we have this for every single combination of question and answer, empowering the country team to submit very precise self-assessment information. When the self-assessment information are compiled, so here I have done some sort of simulation, there are few already compiled, we pass to the scoring component, so we can observe them. So the scoring component has a series of indicators in which we present, for example, here, the scoring. As you can see, I did really bad with myself because I have been below kind of a 70% ranking with all of them. And this is only for component, but in fact, the analytics goes to multiple level of details. For example, component and stage, which is one of the other dimension that is integrated. And then it shows the relative, again, these are relative performances, meaning that the 100% is not scored versus a ranking we have decided or someone has decided. The 100% is simply the maximum I get if I reply yes to every single element in that question. So it's a relative scoring. Now, all this scoring, again, you can go and also have through subcomponents, they help us getting a picture. So I can see that, well, I'm not so bad in the capacity human resources section. I have issues in the actual technology and infrastructure. I should improve in national plan and institutional framework concerning the public governance, but I should do even better in legal and regulatory framework. How these gaps that are identified become actionable. And here we go to the third stage where the AI enters into the picture. So in a totally private manner, our artificial intelligence model, which I name it here, is based on the open source Mistral 3 8B, which is one of the most energy efficient open weight model available today, and is hosted entirely into the GGKP infrastructure, meaning that there is no communication whatsoever with anyone. And all the data analyzed by the model and analyzed inside our own perimeter under UNEP perimeter. So these recommendations are generated how? Well, very simply. The model looks at all the gaps. For example, I see that we have a budget of 48.9% below a target of 70. And then it goes out through the network of actors that we connect and partners and scouts across more than the 50,000 products I mentioned before. What is available out there that can help me in filling this gap? And suddenly I see that the first recommendation card proposes what? A roadmap for a sustainable financial system, which is a product present into the green policy platform of GGKP. The AI suggests that this product is moderately relevant for my use case. Let's see why. That's another important aspect. This is not a blind choice. The system is giving you references to why this connection might be relevant. The resource helps to bridge your budget gap by embedding sustainability into financial planning, leverage market-based initiative like SBN of UNEP-FI, and to integrate long-term costing of externalities into your budget models. And then I say, okay, that looks pretty interesting. Now, let me have a look at the real product. And what happens is then we are eventually redirected on the final website when the policy will come, and the product, here we go. And we will then have access to the actual product that the AI is suggesting, and I can finally eventually download and read it, but read it why? Read it because there is a reason and because there is a gap. So I'm gonna use it in a way that is way more actionable than just someone that is suggesting me to have a look. So that, I would say, stops our initial presentation here. I will just simply spend 1 minute about the glossary part, because it's very much important, because a big component of the work of the WMPSS was centered into the definition of the terminology that is used in the survey, so that there could be an alignment. And most important, this terminology is not fixed, meaning that through conversations, for example, across the workshops we had in the past, has been refined when difficulties in understanding each other arose. So I stop here and I give back the presentation to my colleague, Delena. Yes. And so I think we reached the last part, which is basically the open discussion and Q&A. So the idea here is to, of course, have a double maybe perspective from the country that, of course, have been already onboarded. We might or might not have people in the call, of course, that were already familiar with the WMPSS, but eventually, how do you see the relationship of the work you do in the country with the possibility of a platform such as WMPSS to support and strengthen the policy design, eventually the policy implementation, and then, of course, any other question that might come out, and that we are also happy to keep and follow up in future conversation we might have all together.
Django, I really like how you phrased that, because while you were speaking, I can really see the chat. It's been buzzing. There's a lot of conversation and questions on the details of how WMPSS is working and how it can be applied. So I really want to acknowledge, and just for the information of everybody, we have people from all continents, from different sectors, policy, legislators, also educators, farmers, civil society members, and researchers are logging in, listening to this. It is really a true testament on how GGKP as a leader is really a partnership and knowledge broker leader in the sphere of facilitating the transition to circular economy. Django, there are so many questions, but at this point, I'd like you to thank you for this detail. We are going to transition now into the Q&A. And may I invite all of our panelists and speakers to turn on their cameras and videos, and we will have some time to chat. Oh yeah, we have one more. Sorry, Django. I will let you finish this one
Yeah,
for the next. Okay,
very
go ahead.
simply, of course, that's just to complete. Of course, we mentioned already, WMPSS is open for joining. The initial step, if there is an interest, is to express the interest and eventually reach out to the CCKM global and regional teams. And then we will coordinate with the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, which is the secretariat behind the application. And we will work together to provide access, training, support, and participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Django. And that's really an important point to note, colleagues, that the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership facilitates knowledge exchange and collaboration across its knowledge partners. And the UN Office of Sustainable Development is among our partners, especially in the WMPSS, all in the name of accelerating transition towards green and inclusive economies. So now may I invite Clara, Florisvindo, Fabienne, and our colleague Elena to join us as we discuss some of the questions. Now, noting the time here, and I'm very grateful to all of our 90 plus participants who stayed on all the way to this end. It's very good, affirmation. Thank you for that. But guys, we have so many detailed questions on the Q&A chat. So we only have time to answer a few. Okay, so I think let's begin again with the first question from the Atlantic. The question here, Florisvindo, is in terms of strengthening policy and collaboration in your region and countries, what would we expect as the coming activities that improving regarding policy frameworks and collaboration models in your region? You'll have a minute to answer this question. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jana, and I think this is going well. So just to say that this is a very important question and goes right to the heart of what we are doing now, especially because this project, as you know, started a little bit late, and now the project is executing one of the first activities which has to do exactly with the legal framework. These three countries is now in this moment working with a consulting firm who is developing and collecting information in all these three countries about their legislation, technical capacities, and also to develop the legislation that will serve these three countries in the future. So the first activity regarding Output 1.1 is exactly the assessment of legislative, institutional, and infrastructural capacities for the environmentally sound management of wastes and chemicals at the national level in these three countries. Also, this will encompass another two activities. They are all linked together, and they will all lead to the development of the national strategy, one for each one of the three Atlantic countries.
Thank you very much, Florisvindo. And for our colleagues who want to learn more about this, please contact the Island Secretariat, and there will be more webinars featuring the Atlantic region. Thank you, Florisvindo. On to the Islands Indian Ocean team. Clara, very much appreciated your intervention about the Comoros training. A question here is, what are the follow-ups, or do you plan to continue similar activities that build capacity of national officers involved in policy implementation or enforcement?
Thank you, Jana. And yes, of course. So as I was mentioning before, we will be carrying out this training in Mauritius too. There is actually another training planned for Seychelles in a month. But other than that, in terms of regulatory framework and policies, in Seychelles, for example, Islands has drafted the first hazardous chemicals and waste bill, aiming at domesticating the Stockholm and Minamata Convention on Mercury into the national legislation, and we're actually waiting for the Assembly approval. To be voted. We are also developing specific legislation for priority waste streams, including e-waste, waste oil, used batteries, and end-of-life vehicles. In the Maldives, just to provide examples from the other countries besides Comoros, Islands has designed standards for pesticides management, and we are also designing a green certification label for the tourism sector. That, as you know, is very much key in Maldives. And finally, in Mauritius, Islands is supporting the alignment of the consumer protection regulation to include the Minamata Convention into the legislation. And we are also working on improving the so-called Mauritius Network Service System, that basically is a digital tool that supports importers system and enables real-time monitoring, data retrieval, and stronger enforcement. So it's kind of similar to what we are doing in Comoros. So some are just some of the activities that we are doing, but stay tuned for more. And regarding customs, we will be organizing a sort of knowledge sharing webinar for customs in the Indian Ocean region, but other people will be welcome to join as well. It's probably going to be at the end of May. Because we also believe that different customs offices can share best practices among themselves, and that it would be beneficial. Thank you, Jana, and over.
Thank you so much, Clara. And for our listeners, all of what you've heard, we will put on our website. The Learn Library actually has the legislation and resource materials that Clara has mentioned. And of course, check out our events page on the website too to learn more about our webinars. Thank you, Clara. And now, Django, too many questions to mention. But the main question from us is really, who do we contact? If in step 1, there's a lot of interest, who can they write to? And, what is your suggestion to consolidate all of this interest for the WMPSS on SIDS?
I think so. Yes, the CCKM is the reference to definitely collect the whole interest, and then from there we will initiate with bilateral contact through UNOSD office and GGKP. I think that's really the initial entry point. Also because it will be great to have then bilateral conversation on the specifics, of course, of each country, and also to share more. Now we don't have time about the current and previous experiences with countries that participated in the workshops where WMPSS was used also as part of the tools during the workshop. So creating this conversation. I replied also one of the questions about the effect of recommendations. We are monitoring, we are at the stage of monitoring how the recommendations eventually impact the possible design of policies. There was something that we noticed is that they trigger conversation and knowledge sharing in workshops in a way that was extremely powerful, because suddenly they become a tool to understand which gaps are we sharing, which kind of solutions we have received. So I think these aspects also is one of the key aspects, apart the AI, which basically
Thank you, Jangu. And on that note, I'm glad we have Fabienne here, the head of GGKP and also our program manager for Islands. Fabienne, any remark on what you heard and what you've seen before we hand over to Elena?
Thanks, Jana. I think this was really a very rich webinar. It was really great to hear from the regions and also the interest in the policy support system. So I really encourage all of you who are interested in this to reach out to us through, I would say, Jana, to express interest. That's one tool that can be very useful and supportive of what the regions are doing under the GEF Islands program. But of course, there are many more resources to tap into on the islands.org platform, on the Green Forum. And so, in addition to thanking all of you and all our speakers today, I really want to encourage everyone to continue engaging through the Green Forum, through the webinars and communities of practice that we have. And I just look forward to the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabienne, and thank you, speakers Florisvindo, Clara, and Jangu. We look forward to having you again. I think at this point, the best person to give us the call to action, remember, actionable knowledge, is our communication specialist, Miss Elena Chernisheva, who will walk us through the takeaways and call to action from this webinar. Over to you, Elena.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you, colleagues. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. I hope you find it useful. I found it very useful and insightful, but we still want to improve our webinars. So I will launch an evaluation poll now, and I will ask you to reply to three very quick questions. But if you don't have time to do it right now, you will see the same poll right after the end of this webinar. So if you're in a rush, you can do it later. It's no problem. Now, what we can do next to continue this very rich conversation. First, this is only the second webinar of the Islands Forum Plus, and we have a very exciting lineup of future webinars. Please visit our website, look at what is planned for the future, and register for the next webinars. We also invite you to subscribe to Islands newsletter. You will find the link on the website and in the chat as well. For those who ticked the box, yes, I want to receive Islands news when you are registering for this webinar, you already subscribed, you will receive our updates. I also would like to mention that everyone will receive a follow-up email after this webinar with all the links, slides, recording that you can share with your colleagues, and also we will try to address some very technical question, very important question that you ask, like who you need to contact if. So we will give you a bit of information on that in the follow-up email. Now, we also have a group on the Green Forum. Green Forum is a digital space where you can join, ask questions, share your experiences, share your case studies, your knowledge. We encourage you to join using this QR code, using the link in the chat, because you can meet the experts who you're hearing from today. You can meet there, including Django, who is a very popular person today, I can see. So you can ask your questions there, and you can build a direct connection to the experts in your field. So please join our group and become a part of this community. And finally, as we mentioned today, we already generated and gathered, curated a lot of unique knowledge from our small islands developing states and beyond SIDS, but relevant to SIDS. All this knowledge is available in our knowledge hub, Islands Learn, we call it, and also powered by AI assistant who can help you to look for knowledge, refine your requests. So please try it. We think it's very helpful and it has some very unique knowledge there. So I will stop here. Please Please complete the poll if you haven't done this yet, or complete it after the meeting ends when you will see it in your web browser or Zoom application, depending on what you're using now. And I think that will be it for today, right on time. And back to you, Jana, for your